This is my ranking of combat-focused games that I've played based purely on my personal experience. Each one is placed from masterpiece down to trash, depending on how responsive the fighting feels, how deep the mechanics are, and how well each game makes every encounter intense and satisfying. Let's get straight into the list. Ghost of Tsushima put me into battles where every fight felt like a careful mix of timing, movement, and quick decisions. I spent most encounters switching between stances to handle different enemy types, watching for openings to parry, dodge, and strike before getting surrounded. Large groups could be dangerous, especially when archers kept firing from a distance, so I often mixed sword combat with tools like kunai and other ghost abilities to create space. The ghost stance was easily my favorite mechanic, because building it up during intense fights and cutting through enemies in seconds felt incredibly satisfying. Boss duels demanded patience and precision, while stealth offered another way to approach objectives when direct combat seemed risky. The combat stayed fun through the entire adventure, which is why this lands in my masterpiece tier. Sifu challenged me to improve with every encounter instead of letting me rely on simple button mashing. I spent a lot of time learning enemy patterns, figuring out when to block, parry, or sway, and trying not to get overwhelmed when several opponents attacked at once. The hand-to-hand combat felt incredibly smooth, with every punch, kick, counter, and takedown carrying real impact. I also liked how the environment became part of the fight, letting me use walls, stairs, and objects to gain an advantage. The aging system added tension because each death pushed me closer to failure, forcing me to improve instead of relying on endless retries. Boss fights tested everything I had learned and demanded focus from beginning to end. That combination of challenge and mastery is enough to place it in my excellent tier. Doom Eternal turned every battle into a fast-moving test, where standing still for even a second could get me killed. I was constantly dashing across arenas, swapping weapons, managing ammo, and deciding when to use the chainsaw, flame belch, or glory kills to stay alive. Every resource came from attacking enemies, so combat rewarded aggression instead of caution. The enemy variety kept fights interesting because each demon demanded a different approach, forcing me to think quickly while chaos exploded around me. The super shotgun and its meat hook became my favorite tool, letting me launch across the battlefield and stay in the action. Bosses and tougher enemies pushed my skills further, especially when several dangerous demons appeared together. The relentless pace and satisfying combat loop secure this game a spot in my excellent tier. Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor constantly balanced power and danger in a way that kept combat exciting. I could jump into large groups of orcs, chain together attacks, counters, executions, and bow shots, yet a few mistakes could quickly turn the battle against me. The combat was smooth and responsive, especially when building long combo streaks and cutting through enemies with brutal finishers. I also liked having the choice between direct combat and stealth, depending on how I wanted to approach an area. What stood out most was the Nemesis system, where captains remembered past encounters, gained strength, and returned looking for revenge. That made many battles feel personal rather than random. Unlocking new abilities and dominating stronger enemies kept combat fresh for a long time. The memorable rivalries and satisfying action earned this game a place in my great tier. The first Berserker Khazan demanded patience, precision, and a willingness to learn from every defeat. I spent much of the game studying enemy attacks, deciding whether to dodge or parry, and managing stamina carefully during long battles. The combat had a satisfying rhythm because reckless play was punished quickly, while good timing opened opportunities for powerful counterattacks and weapon skills. I liked experimenting with different abilities and finding combinations that matched my approach. Regular enemies could be dangerous on their own, which kept even basic encounters engaging instead of feeling like filler between major fights. The boss battles were easily the highlight, pushing me to master mechanics rather than depend on luck. Every victory felt earned after repeated attempts and steady improvement. The strong combat carries this game into my good tier. Max Payne 3 blended fast gunfights and slow-motion action in a way that stayed entertaining throughout the entire campaign. I spent most encounters diving through the air, activating bullet time, and lining up precise shots before enemies could react. The shooting felt tight and satisfying, especially when combining different weapons during intense firefights. I also liked how the destructible environments made battles feel more chaotic, with glass, debris, and bullets flying everywhere. The non-regenerating health system added tension because every mistake mattered, forcing me to think carefully instead of rushing forward without consequences. Enemy encounters were straightforward, but the strong weapon handling and stylish action kept them engaging. Watching the final shot connect through the kill camera never seemed to get old either. The satisfying combat and memorable gunplay are enough to place it in my great tier. Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance delivered some of the most over-the-top sword combat I have played. Battles moved at an incredible speed, pushing me to stay aggressive while reacting quickly to enemy attacks. The blade mode mechanic was the highlight because it let me slice enemies in precise directions, cutting off weapons, limbs, or anything else that stood in my way. Regular encounters were fun, but the boss fights were where the combat truly stood out. Each major enemy felt unique and demanded more than simple button mashing to win. I also enjoyed building momentum through long attack strings and finishing opponents with powerful Zandatsu executions to restore health and keep fighting. The action rarely slowed down and constantly rewarded skillful play. The thrilling combat and unforgettable boss battles secure its place in my excellent tier. Black Myth Wukong kept surprising me with how many memorable enemies and bosses it introduced throughout the adventure. Every new area felt packed with fresh encounters, and learning how each opponent attacked became a huge part of the experience. Combat relied heavily on movement, timing, and smart use of abilities, making every victory feel satisfying without becoming overwhelming. I enjoyed switching between different skills, transformations, and spells to find solutions for tougher fights. The staff combat felt quick and responsive, rewarding patience rather than reckless aggression. Boss battles were easily the biggest highlight, because most of them felt unique, with different mechanics, attack patterns, and visual designs that stayed memorable long after I defeated them. The incredible boss roster and consistently rewarding combat are exactly why this belongs in my masterpiece tier. Bayonetta rewarded creativity more than almost any combat game I have played. I spent fights mixing punches, kicks, gunfire, and different weapon combinations while trying to keep long combo chains alive. The combat felt incredibly smooth, but what made it special was how much freedom it gave me to experiment. Witch time became one of my favorite mechanics because perfectly dodging an attack slowed everything down and created opportunities for huge damage. New weapons constantly changed the way I approached battles, whether I was using swords, claws, or some of the game's stranger tools. The boss fights were massive spectacles filled with wild attacks, memorable visuals, and satisfying finishers. Every encounter encouraged me to play with style instead of simply winning. The depth and variety of its combat earn it a place in my excellent tier. Bulletstorm made every encounter feel like a challenge to create the most ridiculous kill possible. The leash mechanic was the main reason combat stayed entertaining, letting me pull opponents through the air, launch them into hazards, or set up flashy kills with different weapons. I was always looking for new combinations because the game rewarded style and experimentation rather than basic accuracy. The weapons were fun to use, especially when upgraded, and many encounters felt like a playground for creating over-the-top eliminations. While the combat eventually became a little repetitive, the constant search for higher-scoring kills kept battles engaging. Large set pieces, explosive moments, and the fast pace helped maintain the excitement across the campaign. The inventive combat ideas earned this game a place in my good tier. ULTRAKILL pushed me to play faster, think faster, and constantly improve the way I approached combat. Every arena felt like controlled chaos, where movement was just as important as aiming. I was always sliding, dashing, jumping, and switching weapons while trying to maintain momentum. What made the combat stand out was how different weapons interacted with each other, creating opportunities for creative and powerful attacks. The game rewarded skill and experimentation, encouraging me to learn advanced techniques instead of relying on the same strategy every time. Boss fights were intense tests of reflexes and positioning, demanding quick reactions while filling the screen with dangerous attacks. Even after finishing levels, I kept returning to improve my performance and discover new combat tricks. The unmatched speed and mechanical depth placed this game in my masterpiece tier. Devil May Cry 5 encouraged me to approach combat like a performance instead of a simple fight for survival. Every battle pushed me to mix different attacks, weapons, abilities, and movement options while keeping my combo rank as high as possible. I enjoyed how each character played differently, forcing me to learn new mechanics and strategies throughout the campaign. Nero's powerful arm abilities, V's unique summoning style, and Dante's massive collection of weapons all kept combat feeling fresh. The boss fights were fast, demanding, and rewarding, especially when I started understanding how to avoid damage while maintaining long combo chains. There was always another technique to learn or a better way to handle an encounter. The incredible combat depth and focus on stylish play secure this game a place in my excellent tier. Sekiro Shadows Die Twice forced me to earn every victory through skill rather than character builds or powerful equipment. Combat revolved around reading attacks, deflecting at the perfect moment, and breaking enemy posture before they could do the same to me. At first, the timing felt demanding, but once I understood the rhythm of battles, every encounter became far more satisfying. I enjoyed how aggressive the combat encouraged me to be, rewarding pressure instead of constant retreat. The prosthetic tools added useful options without taking attention away from the sword fighting that defined the experience. Boss fights were the clear highlight, demanding concentration and punishing hesitation while constantly testing what I had learned. Few games made improvement feel this rewarding. The exceptional sword combat earns this game a place in my excellent tier. Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine 2 delivered battles that felt massive from the moment enemies started pouring onto the battlefield. Combat blended heavy gunfire and brutal melee attacks, letting me switch between blasting enemies from a distance and charging directly into massive swarms. I enjoyed how executions became an important part of staying alive, rewarding aggressive play instead of hiding behind cover. The weapon variety also kept encounters interesting, from powerful rifles to devastating close-range options that tore through enemies. Large battles stood out because hundreds of creatures could flood the battlefield at once, creating a constant sense of scale and pressure. Fighting alongside allied soldiers made the war feel bigger than just my character's mission. The satisfying mix of shooting, melee combat, and spectacle earns this game a place in my excellent tier. That's my ranking of combat-focused games I've played. A few set the standard for action combat, while others never quite reach the same level despite strong ideas. Thanks for watching.